Hey, welcome everyone. My name is Dan Bromberg. I'm the Director of Academic Programs for the Carsey School of Public Policy. I'm joined today by Carolyn Arcand. Carolyn has been teaching with the Masters of Public Administration program in the Carsey School for going on seven years now. Is that right, Carolyn?
That is correct. Yep.
So I'll let you introduce yourself, maybe talk a little bit about what you teach and what your expertise are in. And then maybe we could get into this excellent case study that you put together.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. So my background is in financial management and accounting. And after working in that field for a few years, I went back to school for a master's in public policy and worked in the nonprofit sector for a few years. Then went back for a PhD in public policy. So I teach the fundamentals of policy analysis course in the public policy program. And then I teach a bunch of courses for the Master of Public Administration students, including statistics, financial management and budgeting, grant writing, management techniques, all courses that I have some real world experience in and also an academic background in. So it works out pretty well.
Yeah, awesome. And I feel like Carolyn has mastered how to teach some of these super complex courses in a really accessible way for our MPA students, especially stats. They all love Carolyn's stats course, and they're terrified. But then they get there, and somehow you ease their fears.
It's all about imparting skills that you can learn and use right away on your computer at home. I think that makes it a little bit less intimidating.
Cool. So one of the things that you've been using in your finance and management class is this simulation. So this simulation. So I'll let you talk about the simulation, then maybe we could talk about the how you submitted it and kind of that process. And you won. So we'll chat about that too.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been teaching public and nonprofit financial management and budgeting for a few years now. And I'm always looking for really interesting cases to use in the class or simulation activities. So we learn about things like taxation and government revenue sources, nonprofit revenue sources, where the money comes from and how it's spent. And just finances can sound a little boring right off the bat. So I think that to really make the topic come alive and engage students, it's important to have a number of different activities where we can play the role of real decision makers in budgeting and in policy making around the finances. So I had been using a variety of different cases that I had found from some different sources, but I was keeping my eye out for some real world examples that I could turn into a simulation where I could develop something where students could play the role of policymakers who are deciding and making recommendations on a real issue in public finance. And so I just happened upon an issue related to a really popular local park in southern Maine. This park is the home of the most photographed lighthouse in the US, so it gets a lot of tourists. And the locals were getting upset that so many tourists were coming to the park that it was kind of detracting from the locals' ability to enjoy the park. And the locals were the ones funding the park with their tax dollars. So kind of the public decided to figure out a way to impose a parking fee on visitors. And the real challenge when you go from free to fee is dealing with people's feelings around paying to use a public resource that used to be free. And certainly there were locals had different feelings about what should happen in terms of whether or not it made sense to charge people to park at this public, lovely park. And there were some different feelings in town about who should pay and what the amount of the fee should be and who would be blocked out by imposing a fee. And where the revenue would come from. So it was just such an intriguing real life scenario that I decided to turn it into a real case and use it in my class.
I'll jump in for a sec. I love using simulations in my classes as well. And I think it's always funny because students kind of, at first glance, are like, we got to act or we have to do something that's going to be kind of silly. And then they really get into their roles and perform at a pretty high level. It's always so impressive to see them kind of turn it on once they get what the simulation's trying to do.
Right. Yeah. And actually, when I first kind of started developing this and using it in my class, I didn't assign them particular roles at first. I just kind of wanted to see where they fell on the issue. And then I got some feedback in terms of how their feelings around the issue and kind of where they tended to fall. And I used that to create fictional roles that I then improved the case with. So I think designing it and using it in my class and getting that feedback from the students was really valuable in terms of improving the case and taking it to kind of a more broad-based, this could work across multiple classes type of level.
Awesome. So then you I guess took the case, you wrote it up a bit further, and you submitted it to the Maxwell School for this ePark competition, which has been around for a number of years. I mean, I think I remember using it when I was a doctoral student, and I've certainly used them as a resource in a number of my classes. So could you tell us about that a bit? So did you kind of have to change it a bit, or did you just kind of roll with what you had? And
Right. So when I developed the case or the simulation for my class, it was very technical. So it was very focused on learning public finance and applying tools of public finance. And so what I wanted to do was make it a little bit more general so that public policy students and public administration students could use the course in learning about collaborative governance, whether or not they knew anything about public finance. So I kind of took out some of the more technical aspects of it and worked on making it more broadly accessible. I created 7 different characters for the students to play. You mentioned it. It helps to have those characters coming from different viewpoints and with different goals. And I created those based on student feedback and also based on some real actors who had been part of the process of developing the parking fee structure. So all of the background information is real. Those roles are fictional. And I've also used the simulations and kind of learned from the simulations that are available through the Maxwell School. So I was a big fan of the website. I'm actually a graduate of Syracuse University from my undergrad, so I'm always looking at kind of what's going on there as well. And I figured, why not submit it and see if this could be more broadly applicable. It is based on a park in southern Maine, but really you can see this happening in any area where tourism is a major driver for their economy. So yeah, I made it a bit more broad-based. I made a teaching note with some background readings that teachers could utilize. And I also enclosed a copy of what the real public actors ended up doing in this situation, so that after the students decide what should happen with these parking fees, and after they present their policy recommendations, the class can then go on to have a discussion with the professor about what actually happened and kind of evaluate where they fell in relation to what actually happened. And kind of that can create a really neat discussion about, whose recommendations are the best in terms of achieving equity goals, in terms of generating enough revenue. So there's multiple ways of using that simulation.
Cool.
And so I submitted it several months ago and just heard back a few weeks ago.
So congrats. I mean, so Carolyn was one of the announced winners. I mean, so that's awesome. And I'm on the hook now. I kind of want to know what happened. So what do they do? What's the fee structure?
So what they eventually decided to do was there is a fee. It's an hourly rate. And mainly the idea is to charge the fee to tourists. So people who are coming in from outside of Maine, who are visiting, and help to offset those local costs. Cape Elizabeth residents, that's the town where the park is located, I believe they are free, so they don't have to pay. They're already paying through their property taxes. And then another issue was that other locals in surrounding towns had some big feelings about this fee structure, and what they decided to do was make a season pass. So you could buy this pass once if you live outside of town, but you're a Mainer. And then you can use the park all summer long. So they tried to kind of balance that fee versus free for different people. And also there are a number of different parking lots within the park. So they made the most attractive parking lots, like right near this historic lighthouse, be subject to the fee. And then there are some kind of parking lots on the other side of the park that's more known and used by locals that are actually free. So not all of the lots are subject to the fee. So they tried to balance those equity concerns and those kind of locals versus tourist concerns. And so far, actually, the park has been closed for a few months due to the coronavirus. But last season, when they first implemented the fees, it was actually a great success. The tourists didn't realize that there had never been a fee before and didn't mind paying it. When they were asked about that, they expected to be charged a fee to visit a public park. And the locals felt pretty comfortable with the low rate of the season pass if they lived outside of town and were coming in with contributing. So it seems to have worked out pretty well. And I will say it's really interesting to see where the students come up with and the different ideas that students come up with when they're trying to figure out how to create something that's fair, that's politically feasible, that people will be okay with, regardless of where they fall. And that will be a good generator for revenue for the park. There's so many moving parts in the case, but I really think it could be accessible to students in policy and administration who are more technically interested in public finance or who aren't. There's a lot of neat moving parts there.
Yeah, really cool. I mean, you could see coalition building. I mean, you could see any number of different aspects. So, I just kind of wanted to say this is super emblematic of, I think, all of your teaching, Carolyn. I mean, I think, I recall when you were first teaching some of the capstone courses, some of the thought and rigor and research that went into kind of developing those courses. Carolyn's now moving a statistics course online, which obviously is done, but it is, the work and thought that you're putting into doing that really deserves to be applauded. I mean, just one example is, last year, Carolyn kind of said to me, look, we're not there yet. I'm not ready for this to go online. And it was an issue that you just thought it wouldn't necessarily translate in the same way that you could do in the classroom. So I think this is just one more example of your exemplary teaching. So congratulations. We're thrilled that you were able to submit this, that you were able to win. Really super cool. And that you're able to share this with all of our students. They're lucky to have you teaching for them. So congrats. And we can't wait to shout this out and let everyone know about it.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it.
Yep, our pleasure.